All right, let's get right into it. The big question today: why is the US government in a partial shutdown? Again.
So here's the headline you've probably been seeing everywhere. As of midnight this past Saturday, the money ran out for parts of the U.S. federal government, and just like that, we're in a partial shutdown. Okay, but you hear that term, partial shutdown, and you might be wondering, what does that actually mean? Well, unlike a total government freeze, this is much more targeted. See, most agencies, they're actually funded all the way through September. The entire deadlock, the whole reason for this mess, is about one very specific and frankly very controversial department. And if all of this is giving you a serious case of déjà vu, well, you're not wrong. I mean, believe it or not, this is the second time in just the last year that a funding fight has forced the government to close its doors, at least partially.
And get this, it's happening just 11 weeks, only 11 weeks after the end of that last crisis. You remember the huge 2025 shutdown. That one went on for a record-breaking 43 days and caused some really serious widespread disruption. So, the big question is, how on earth did we get back here so fast? To really get it, we need to pop the hood and look at the political mechanics, the gridlock that actually got us here. All right, let's break it down step by step. So the Senate, they actually did manage to pass a last-minute funding bill. Good news, right? Well, that bill funds most of the government all the way until September. But, and this is the huge but, it only gave the Department of Homeland Security a tiny 2-week funding patch. Just 2 weeks. And since the House is out of session right now, they haven't approved it. The bill is just stuck. And that's what triggered the shutdown.
Now, this is where it gets really interesting. Why? Why is the Department of Homeland Security the one single sticking point? Why is it the single point of failure here? The answer, it turns out, isn't just about spreadsheets and budgets. It's actually rooted in a really tragic event. You see, this entire political firestorm, this huge fight over DHS funding, it was all ignited just last weekend. And it started with a fatal shooting in Minneapolis that has, understandably, captured the nation's attention. Right at the center of the story is a civilian, an ICU nurse named Alex Priddy. And tragically, their death has now become this incredibly powerful rallying cry for major reform. So, from what we know from reports, Priddy was fatally shot by a U.S. Border Patrol agent during an altercation. The backlash was immediate, and it came from both sides of the aisle, bipartisan criticism. It's now kicked off a full civil rights investigation by the Justice Department. This whole thing really taps into years of debate about the agency's tactics and accountability. And that's exactly why this one single incident is carrying so much political weight right now. And that one event, that tragedy, it has translated directly into very concrete political demands. I mean, look at what Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer said. He laid out some really clear conditions. Quote, masks need to come off, cameras need to stay on, and officers need visible identification. No secret police. So you see, this fight isn't really just about funding. It's about using that funding deadline to force some fundamental policy changes. Okay, so to really get a handle on what the shutdown could mean, it's actually really helpful to compare it to that massive crisis we all went through just a few months back. Remember the 2025 shutdown? That thing was an absolute marathon. It went on for 43 days. Think about that, 43 days, the longest in U.S. history. It left hundreds of thousands of federal workers without a paycheck for over a month. And that brings us to the crucial difference here. The 2025 shutdown, that was really widespread, and it was mostly about immigration funding, about the money. This one, it's much more surgical, it's narrow, and it's about something way more explosive, the actual conduct and policies of the Department of Homeland Security itself. All right, so what happens now? Where do we go from here? Well, this whole confrontation is built around a very, very specific timeline. You know that 2-week funding patch for DHS we talked about? That wasn't just some random number they pulled out of a hat. No, it's a deliberately short leash. It's designed to force everyone to the table for some really intense negotiations. And what's on that table? Some very specific demands. Things like ending what they call roving patrols. That's where agents can operate miles away from the actual border. They're also demanding judicial warrants for enforcement actions and mandating that body cameras have to stay on and that officer IDs have to be visible all the time. So what this does is it creates this incredibly tight timeline, a pressure cooker, really. The partial shutdown is happening right now. For the next 2 weeks, you're going to see lawmakers going back and forth, negotiating these very specific reforms for DHS.
And all of that leads to a hard deadline in mid-February. By then, Congress has to strike a deal, or they risk a much, much wider and more serious funding crisis.
And that really leaves us with the central question, doesn't it? Yeah, there's a political clock ticking away in Washington, but the real issues here, the ones at the very heart of this, are about trust, accountability, and justice. So can a 2-week negotiating window, can it really solve a crisis that was sparked by such a profound tragedy on a street in Minneapolis? I guess we're all about to find out.